Murder, mystery, secret love affairs, the makings of a great book, or just what happens at your local TV station? We're going to find out right now. Hello everyone, it's good to have you with us. I'm Lynn Doyle. You know, all this month here on It's Your Call, we've been featuring some outstanding authors, and we have another one for you today. He's written an ebook that I just couldn't put down. But you probably know him best, not so much as an author, but as the Dean of Philadelphia Television News. He's Larry Kane, the award-winning journalist, author, and veteran of 45 years in TV journalism. Well, now he's used those 4+ decades as inspiration for his latest book. It's called Death by Deadline. It's a mystery thriller about local TV news, and it's now available at Amazon.com. And I am just tickled to be able to talk to you about this, because I'm not lying, Larry, when I said I couldn't put my iPad down.
That's kind. You know, when you write fiction, which is the first time I've ever done that, I've written other books, you write in a vacuum. You wonder, is anybody going to really enjoy that? You know, I mean, and I'm glad you did. When you wrote the email to me and said I really loved it, made my day.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. What inspired you to foray into fiction? Because I know you've written other nonfiction books specifically about the Beatles, which was one of your first loves. But why now try mystery?
Well, I'll tell you why. It started by accident, because I originally wanted to write a book, a nonfiction book, about the sorry state of local television news. The fact that local TV news has lost maybe 35–40% of its audience over the last 10 or 15 years, even when I was still actively involved, because I think of content issues, because of the internet, because of a lack, in some cases, not all, of ethics. All right, and I think people realize that. But I also realize that no one would read it. All right, that it would probably be just a tirade, and I don't want to do that. So I decided to turn it into a mystery thriller, at the center of which is at the core of which are 3 TV stations.
So explain for people the premise of the book from your perspective as its author.
By the way, it's also available on the other e-platforms, iPad and Nook and all those places too. But the book is about a big city, surprise, Philadelphia region. Okay, it's about 3 television stations, an underworld leader, a community leader who's really somewhat of a different person than he supposes to be, some newspapers. It involves some underworld racketeering people. It also involves people who are involved in the civic discourse every day, sort of. It involves love and a little bit of romance. And I'm not very good at that, but I'm trying writing that. And it involves what happens inside a newsroom where bad information can actually, and there's no exaggeration about this, kill people.
You know, that I found really, really interesting, because the idea that the competition is so fierce among television news stations, not just in Philadelphia, but all across the country, and with all of the 24-hour cable channels as well. The competition is so fierce to be first that they're not always right. And that's kind of what you weave into in terms of a message in this book.
Well, there's a tremendous competition in local newsrooms. You're sitting in a local newsroom right now. The stations have, and there's actually 4 local news operations in the Philadelphia area. There are 3 in this book. The stations have monitors up, and they're all watching each other. And God forbid, goodness forbid, that you get a story that the one station doesn't have, and they have this little insular world. Oh, they got it before us. Mm-hmm. Well, so that creates an environment where being first is more important than being right, quite often. And we've seen some evidences of that in the last several weeks in Philadelphia, in terms of news stories. Okay, we've seen so not really fatal news stories, but news stories. So as a result of that, you have this struggle to be first. I would rather be second and right than first and wrong. And my concern is that newsrooms, which are being cut back by so many different organizations, are left abandoned by people who are mediocre and unprofessional and could actually kill people. And people die in this book because of news.
Well, one of the leading characters, an anchor man who had been around for quite some time, struggled with those very ethics. And as I was reading it, I couldn't help but wonder, is this almost autobiographical? Was it based on your own personal experiences?
Somewhat, but let me be very honest with everybody, and you know the story. I am a washed-up anchor man in this story.
Hardly.
Who is surviving a tremendous catastrophe that occurs to this community. And unlike reporting the story, I actually become in it, and I'm fighting for my life throughout this book. So I'm really not the center of this book. Some people suggest that anchor people try to make themselves the center of attention. That's not what it's about. But I try to tell the story through the discourses of the newsroom, and that includes arguments. To give you an example, stations left naked, and a reporter, a young writer says, and it's the anniversary of the death of Malcolm X, and she says, I'm doing the story on Malcolm the 10th.
Right.
And the manager says, Malcolm the 10th. And she says, yes, and this person responsible for your news, folks, yes, it says in the almanac, it says Malcolm Roman numeral the 10th. And other things like that.
I got a little
or the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, the Festival of Lights.
I got a little chuckle out of both of those, but we have seen that, having been around news for quite some time, that, you know, there are people who are in these positions, and not necessarily because they're the most qualified or because they've put their time in. You know, circumstances or a preference of a news director or whatever happens to, you know, to dictate who's in that star seat for any given time. Now, that has to be based on what you have really, truly seen.
Well, most of the anchors in Philadelphia are good journalists. They really are. You know, Jim Gardner's been around a long time. He's worked real hard. He's a news guy. He likes it. So most of the anchors here are real journalists. This town, by the way, can see the difference immediately on the air. They know who's doing it, and they know who's not really getting involved in the news. I think the issue with anchor power in this book is that one anchor in particular is very powerful, and as a result, he's more interested in satisfying his own needs, professionally and otherwise, than telling the truth. So there's some tragedies that occur in this book, and this guy can be seen laughing and smiling and happy about this.
Right.
And he doesn't really care about the people.
But I think when people are watching this, and then when they get the book and they read it, while we have the utmost respect for those who are on the air right now, certainly in 40 years, there have been some salacious scandals that have occurred, you know, behind the newsroom doors, and some of it makes its way to the gossip pages, some of it makes it to the crime pages. So whether or not these particular characters are based on real people, you've certainly seen a lot in 45 years.
We have in this book
You've seen some failures too.
We have in this book a drug-infested anchor who happens to be popular, who's having a relationship with he's single at the time, with a weekend weather person. But this is not.
Gee, I bet that never happens.
I don't know. but we have an anchor woman who is concerned that her beauty will prevent her from being a success.
I'm sure that never happens either.
I don't know about that. But
she's too beautiful to do a good job,
that's right?
That's the idea.
We have a lot of sexism, okay? And we have some management failures here, too.
Oh, and you've probably never seen that in 45 years.
I must have worked for about 25 general managers. But I'll tell you something. Honestly, this is not a revenge book. This is the truth. And if you know, to me, I'll tell you what happened. I wrote the book, then I read the book, and then I got scared. So, not about writing the book, but it was kind of suspenseful.
Yeah, and it is a suspenseful book. It is an e-book, and we're going to talk about that and the future of literature when we come back. First, though, we have to take a break. If you have questions or comments for Larry Kane, or if perhaps you've read his past books or you want to read this current one, want more information, be sure to email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.